Welcome, everyone. It's good to be here with you today. And this is the 6 weeks to Flexible Work Success, the Insights series. I'm Callie Williams-Yost, and I am thrilled to be here live with you not only today, but for the next 6 weeks. This series is part of a broader effort we will be undertaking over the coming months to help leaders, managers, teams, and individuals come together to reimagine where, when, and how work can be done, lives managed through all phases of this pandemic response. Because flexible work is not only the way through and out of this crisis, but it is also the way we can rebuild our economic momentum as well. And we want to offer our more than 2 decades of experience to help organizations and people navigate that journey. So this Insight series is specifically focused on making the most of the next 6 weeks because they will be both difficult, as in many places strict safe-at-home mandates will remain in place, but also the most critical to prepare ourselves, our businesses, and our economy for what will be a flexible, evolving new normal going forward. Joining me for this series will be my producer, Lauren Fossbenner. Hi, Lauren.
Hello, everybody.
So let's start with the objectives. What I'm going to cover today is I am going to explain the goals of the 6 weeks to Flexible Work-Life Success series. I'm going to describe why this is not normal, remote, and flexible working, but still an important opportunity we want to try to leverage. Recognize the principles for reimagining work and life in crisis. Define why the next 6 weeks matter now and beyond. Review the topics we're going to cover over the next 6 weeks. And finally, when we have a chance at the end, we're going to answer as many questions as we can. So, how will I define success for all of you at the end of this Insight session? It will be if we have achieved the following goals. You feel like someone was there to catch you in the remote and flexible work deep end of the pool, where COVID-19 threw you literally overnight. Also, you have a greater sense of strategy and intention guiding this new, unfamiliar, and overwhelming way of working and living. And as well as some hope and some inspiration, we can do this, I know it, and not only just survive this pandemic, but come out the other side and thrive again. And you are able to make the most of even this strictest safe-at-home period. You feel better prepared to operate in the ongoing, evolving, flexible new normal that will inevitably follow this period. Now, what that's going to look like exactly, we still don't know. Even Scott Gottlieb, who is the Trump administrator's former head of the FDA, he admitted in a Wall Street Journal op-ed last week that it's probably going to include a hybrid remote work, on-site work reality, staggered schedules to minimize rush hour crowds, alternating A and B teaming, as well as an enhanced use of technology. And also, Cushman and Wakefield in the Netherlands is already reimagining what they're calling the 6 feet office. In other words, it will be flexible. So, here's a question that we are going to, a polling question we're going to ask you guys. Lauren, how do we have that teed up?
Nope.
Nope, okay.
So why don't you just ask the question?
Okay, I'm going to ask you guys this question. And then I'm going to, question is this. So before the crisis, how was work flexibility viewed in your organization? And unfortunately, we don't have the polling question operating at the moment, but just think about this. So in your organization before the crisis, how was flexibility viewed in your organization? Was it a strategy to retain talent, manage workload, grow the business? That's the first option. Was it an employee perk or benefit? That is the second option. Or you're just not even sure. That's the third option. So think about that. And I will show you when we asked that question in a national survey that we did a couple of years ago, this is what people said. When we asked, do you view work-life flexibility in your organization as, it was very interesting. 49% said they saw it as a strategy that their employer uses to retain talent, manage workload, and grow the business. 39% said an employee perk or benefit, and 11% said they didn't know. Now, what was also really interesting is that if you worked in a remote location, you were more likely to see it as a strategy. So again, when you work remotely already, you understand this is a powerful way of operating the business. So the good news in all of this is the rapid remote flexible work response to COVID-19 has actually shown leaders and organizations that flexibility in the way work is done is a powerful strategy for maintaining operating continuity and also just basically running the business. They can see now, wait, I can keep my business going after a major disruption. However, according to what we found in our research, a near majority of people went into this crisis not seeing it that way. Now, the challenge going forward over the next 6 weeks and beyond is to harness that increased awareness and help people and organizations, and not only that, but just even the broader economy, come out the other side of this pandemic understanding the broader strategic capabilities of a flexible work response. So, to do that, first we need to understand that this is actually not the normal way that remote work and flexible work often happens. We've been hearing that a lot, and I think it's a very important point to emphasize. But again, it is still an opportunity. So to understand why this is not normal, let's look at what an optimal, intentional culture shift towards greater flexibility would look like. What does that process look like, and when it's done in its optimal way? Well, first, you're going to go through a period of discovery. You're just going to know, where are you? Like, how is work being done currently? Where are the pockets of success? How can you leverage those? Where are the gaps? Where are the areas of resistance? You have a chance to really build readiness so people are ready to accept the change and they're all on the same page. Then you take a period of time and you train people, because knowing how to work flexibly, benefit the business, benefit people, that's a whole new set of skills. And you want to have everybody coming at it from the same perspective. And then at the same time, you're also aligning all the other parts of the organization behind that flexible work culture shift. That includes HR, IT, facilities, leadership, the strategy of the business, like all of that is aligning behind it. Then you go into a period of pilot where you are actually in real time experimenting with these new ways of working. So you have time to practice all the things that you have learned so that you can truly understand what's working, what you want to continue, the momentum you want to continue, but also where you may need to continue to do some work to move forward. And that's what you do in the sustainability phase. Now, in truth, what actually happens most of the time before the crisis is that people really weren't typically trained in any way. We found in our research that only 42% of people who said they worked flexibly had any training or guidance. So mostly what happened with people is they got a laptop and they were told, okay, go ahead and work remotely. Unfortunately, without that training, we found in our research there was a significantly less productivity and team coordination that would have happened. But again, they got the laptop, they were told to work remotely, but the difference in that situation was they weren't doing it overnight. They weren't doing it with everybody else, and they weren't doing it for the first time in a pandemic. So again, this is what's making this situation really unique, because that is exactly what happened. A month and a half ago, essentially everybody just went right into pilot overnight. No warning, no readiness building, no understanding of where things stood beforehand, no broader organizational alignment, and absolutely no training. And you were just told to do it. And in many cases, people were working remotely for the very, very first time. In fact, Monmouth University just published a study of full-time US workers. I think that's who it was either adults or full-time US workers. And what they found is that 27% said the virus had forced them to work from home for the very, very first time. 27% of the US adult population went from never having worked remotely to working remotely overnight. And that doesn't even include the people who may have worked periodically every now and then, but by no means did it full time. So again, this was a profound shift. So how do you unlock the opportunity from this experience, this very intense, rapid response to the virus? Well, what you're going to do is you are going to follow these principles, and they are as follows. First and foremost, when you want to reimagine work and life through crisis, you need to keep it simple. So what you want to do is you want to not start to take on a whole level of new ways of using technology, new ways of communicating, new ways of doing your job. You just want to keep it simple and start with where you are. So this is going to be the key. These two principles are going to be the keys to what we're going to cover on the rest of this series. We're also going to talk about how important it is to be intentional, but not perfect. Because remember, you're in pilot right now. You're in pilot without any preparation. So to think that you're going to do this perfectly is not fair. It's an unfair bar, but you're going to be as intentional as you can be. And again, we're going to cover that in this series, what this looks like. And this is really the big three. It's just an ongoing prioritization, communication, and then recalibration. That's really where you're going to do the learning. That's where you're going to ultimately know what's worked, what still needs to be done differently in the next phase as we move forward. And that's where you're going to leverage the learning. So these are the principles that will guide the insights that we're going to cover in this 6 weeks to Flexible Work and Life Success series. These are the 5. Okay, so we know that a near majority went into this crisis seeing work flexibility not as a business strategy. That's not how they saw it. They saw it mostly as a perk or a benefit, or they weren't even sure what it was, but a near majority did not see it as a strategy. So these next 6 weeks are really important, not only for success right now in what is going to probably still be in a lot of places, the very most extreme safe at home mandate, but beyond, as we begin to adapt and create that flexible, evolving new normal. You are going to want to make sure that work flexibility, technology, and workspace are seen as a coordinated whole. Because again, going into this crisis, my experiences with most organizations, these 3 things, these enablers of work, were very siloed. They were not implemented in a coordinated, deliberate way. They were very separate. And at the end of this 6-week series, the goal is going to be that the insights we share are going to begin to help you see this, again, as a coordinated whole that enables the work. So what does that look like in action? So it's essentially this. When that coordinated whole is being used in a strategic, intentional way, managers, teams, and individuals are actually leveraging the work flexibility. And by that, I mean time, I mean remote work, I mean flexibility in work processes and even in the pace of work. They are leveraging the technology that they have. They are actively using it. And in many cases, in many organizations, again, before there's this intentional, strategic focus on using flexibility, technology, there isn't a contextualization to it. Does that make sense? So when we go into organizations and we link technology to flexibility and then also ultimately to the use of workspace on and off site, suddenly there's a context to it. It's like, oh, it is enabling the work. The work is the lead, and the discussion is, how does technology enable it? And in the case right now of where we are, the workspace that we're leveraging is going to be truly off-site. There is no on-site at this moment, but that's going to begin to change. And so again, you're going to want the way your people, managers, your teams are actually thinking through all these different elements in order to execute the work in that flexible new reality. And again, going back to, this is strategic intention. It's taking all of those and saying to yourself, what do we need to get done? And how, when, and where do we do it best so that I can do my job, I can achieve the goals of the business, and I can manage my life? So this is essentially what we're going for in terms of the insights that we're going to share over the next 6 weeks. So I have another question for you, and I'm not sure the polling is working. And I want you to think about this as we go into the Q&A in a few minutes. Because Lauren, we don't have it loaded up, do we?
Nope. But
Okay.
I might suggest that maybe people might want to put their answer in chat. Maybe.
Okay, that's a good idea. Okay,
Yeah.
so because I think we have plenty of time actually. Oh, we're doing great with time. Okay. So here's the question. I want you to put your answer in chat because it's a very, very interesting perspective on where we are right now. Okay, because I think if most organizations are falling into these 3 categories. So would you say that your organization right now is white knuckling it through this period, hoping things will go back to normal sooner rather than later? So that's the first option. Your organization is white knuckling it through this period, hoping things go back to normal sooner rather than later. The second option is your organization is seriously considering where, when, and how work will need to be done differently going forward. Like, they're getting it that we're not going to go back to the way things were anytime soon. And so we really need to rethink this flexible work model that we're working in. And finally, the final answer, it's a little bit of both. There's some white knuckling and there's some hoping that, you know, but there's also this starting to realize that maybe we do have to do things differently. So put your answer in chat when we get to the Q&A, or Lauren, if we have some answers already, I'd love to hear them if people have put them in chat.
It looks like it's a combination of both, and sort of seriously considering the second option.
Oh, really? People are really seriously considering. That's great.
Yep, looks like a both. Yep.
That's great. But a little bit of both is really the primary answer, would you say?
Looks like it. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, good. That's actually very hopeful. You know, it was funny. I was waiting to hear what you were going to say because I'm concerned there's a bit of white knuckling going on, but I think maybe we've turned a corner. I think you're starting to see that yes, we do have to do things a little bit differently. Good. Well, that's what we're going to do in this series, and I'm excited to get there with you. And at the end of the series, I want to hear where you are. I really do. I want you to pin this moment, and I'm going to come back to it at the end of the series. And I want to know if you're still sort of in that in between, or if no, we are truly moving forward with seriously thinking about how we have to do things differently. So no matter where you are and where your organization is right now, the goal of this series is, again, to help you make the most of this really critical 6-week period. We're going to share insights that influence work and life success, not only in this crisis right now, in the deepest part of it, but also as we move forward. And here's what here are the various topics we're going to cover. We're going to talk about shared leadership, which is very, very important. We're going to talk about trust, performance, and also empathy. Then there are boundaries. Lots of that is coming up these days. Where are the boundaries? How do I set them? How do I set them in a way that works for me and for everybody else that I work with and live with? Clarifying, shifting, urgent business priorities. This is what makes this time particularly tricky. is that this is a really tough business environment too, and it's changing rapidly. So priorities are always shifting. So how do you manage that? Measuring results when you probably weren't doing it very well beforehand. So this is not unusual, and we can start talking about how to get around that, getting around some of those performance metrics. Physical, emotional, and mental well-being is so critical. We're going to talk about technology and workspace as tools. So again, sometimes this conversation around the coronavirus crisis can revolve very heavily around adopting new technology, but looking at technology as a tool to do the work, and also the workspace ultimately as we move into this next phase. What could that look like? Then we're going to talk about communication and coordination, because there is just an extra layer of it, and it is important. And what does that look like, and how can you do it most effectively in a crisis environment, especially when you're working in a radically different way? We're going to talk about caregiving and cohabitating. I don't know about you, but I now have 4 people working in one place between 2 college students, my husband and myself. We're going to talk about, hang on a second, recalibration and improvement. And then, sorry, my slides are going very quickly. I apologize. And then preparing for what's next. All right, so those are the topics we're going to cover in my super duper sensitive Zoom platform right now. Okay, so we're going to get started on Thursday. This is the final segment in the introduction to the series. And this is where we're going to talk about the 7 truths of work and life. And basically, we're going to talk about how do you make what matters happen day to day without the clocks and walls. We used to have walls, we used to have clocks that told us where work ended and the other parts of life began, and man, they are gone. What does that look like now? Because that's the other piece of this puzzle. As I have said before in other venues, and I will say again here, we're watching the real-time destruction of the artificial boundary that used to be between work and life. And it's something we're going to have to think about and manage, not only personally, but as a business strategy. That has to be part of this consideration in this flexible, evolving new normal. And I'm going to introduce a tool. I've adapted the Tweak It practice, which is from my book, Tweak It, and that we use in our flexible work culture implementations. I've adapted it and to make a simple little tool that we're going to build on each week. And I'm calling it the Quarantine Daily Routine. So we're going to talk about that on Thursday, which will finish up the introduction of the series. And then we're going to dive in next week and get started. So I'm very excited, and I hope you are too. I'm especially excited because you've all told me you're almost there, that you're, on the cusp. Either you're there or you're on the cusp of knowing you have to do things differently, so we can accomplish a lot together. Now, before we get to the Q&A, this is something really, really important that I want to share with you. Flexibility in where, when, and how we work and live, I honestly believe, is really the way through this crisis for us. And it's not going to be perfect. It is going to require new skills. It is going to require more effort. It is not exactly how things were before COVID-19, but it's really our best bet. It's our best bet in order to have an operating foundation on which to do our jobs, to manage our lives, and really to rebuild the economic momentum that we have to keep going in order for us to come to this other side and not only just survive it, but ultimately, again, thrive. And I know that we will. As the Surgeon General said, COVID-19 is our generation's Pearl Harbor. And I thought that was an interesting analogy because, really to me, it's our Rosie the Riveter moment. We really can do this. So let's make the most of this 6 weeks together. I'm excited. I look forward to hearing from all of you throughout the process. I'll see you here on Thursday. So with that, any questions? I have questions for you. Okay, so if you don't have any questions for me right now, I have a couple questions for you, but I want to hear your questions also. So as you're thinking about the questions you want to ask, here are mine. What do you want to learn over the next 6 weeks? And how can this insight series best serve you? Okay. So if you want to think about it and, let me know in an email or any kind of, way you communicate versus Twitter, LinkedIn, any way you want to let me know, please do. You can also just put it in chat and we will keep track of it. So any questions, Lauren? Or comments about what you want to learn and how this series can help you?
So Elizabeth asks, I want to open up my thinking and see this as an opportunity for my team. That's what she would like to get out of this.
Okay. You want to open up your thinking and see this as an opportunity for your team. Okay. So may I add, I wish I could, here's the question I'd like to ask you back, Elizabeth, if you wouldn't mind putting it in chat. Where do you get stuck? Where do you find yourself getting stuck? Because what I'm hearing is managers are telling me that they get stuck in that they don't feel like they know how to communicate and effectively with their team in this new way, and they don't know how to set clear priorities, and they don't know if they can engage them effectively, and they're wondering if they can ascertain performance, and how do you do that when you can't see people? And like, these are some of the things that are really getting people stuck, or at least managers stuck. Do those resonate with you?
Elizabeth has not responded, Callie.
Okay.
So yeah.
I'm going to say, Elizabeth, one of the ways that you
here
can...
she has.
Good,
Sorry.
good. Okay.
I want to, it says, I think it is making sure we've structured things to maximize people's productivity.
Got it. It's the productivity question. Okay. So it's all, okay. So all of the things that I just said are what you can begin to do and what we're going to cover in this series. And, it's about making sure you have clear priorities in place. How do you set those in a crisis situation where things could be changing very rapidly? It's also making sure that your people understand what those priorities are. You're communicating them. You have a regular protocol or cadence of communication. We're going to talk about that. It's also that model of shared leadership. It's not just all on you. And I think that's a really important mindset shift that this whole experience is going to cause, is that it's not just about the manager alone being in charge of making sure performance is happening. It's that it is a partnership between manager, teams, and each individual. And how do you structure that? Once you do that, you have priorities clear, you have a communication protocol in place where you feel like you're being able to share those priorities and you're getting updates on a regular basis, not just as a team, but also one-on-one, that you have an opportunity to coach based upon what you're learning, and also the technology part of this. And we'll get into this a little bit more, but you want to keep it simple. You want to start where you are, but how can you leverage the technology that you have to begin to understand how to manage and monitor performance a little bit better than you probably are? There are usually some capacities within technology that are not being utilized that we can also talk about as well. So again, it's seeing that there's just some structure to put around this that actually can enhance that sense of possibility and seeing this as a way through to the other side. Any more questions?
Couple comments and a couple of questions.
Okay.
So along the same lines of what you just talked about with Elizabeth, Erin made a comment, I'd like to learn how to make sure my team is as optimized as possible.
Yep.
And then Camille asks, how do individuals integrate personal organization / productivity tools for success across both personal and professional lives?
Yep. Okay. So we are going to talk about that when I introduce the quarantine daily routine, a way to start being intentional about what you're trying to get done and how, when, and where you're doing it, what that could look like. And again, being mindful that we're, keeping it simple and starting where we are, but how you could build on that because again, no boundaries, no clocks and walls. You got to be more intentional about what it is you're trying to get done. And how can you do that? And I'm being mindful that we're in a crisis period right now. And how do you meld those two realities? The fact that we do have to be productive and perform in a pretty tough environment. And what does that look like? And how do we make that happen? So that's what we will definitely be covering for sure.
How about time for one more, Callie, since
One
we're
more.
at
Yep.
12:30?
Yep. And what we're going to do is we'll keep track of any of the questions we did not get to, and we'll write them out, and I will give you some answers, and I will also include that in the PDFs that we put on the site.
So the last one I have for today is from Nadia. Will we learn about examples when Flex has or could help redesign the work with itself?
Absolutely. You know what's so interesting is once you start to work flexibly, and once you start to ask that question, what are we trying to do, and how, when, and where do we do it best? It's interesting. The work starts to redesign just automatically, because you start to see how things can be done better. You start to see how things maybe aren't as efficient as they could be, or how now in this new environment, maybe you're using technology you hadn't used before, how you could do things maybe in a more automated way that you hadn't been thinking of. So absolutely, we will talk about that for sure. But that's a great question. And you can see it gets me excited. It's actually one of the things I love about the potential and the power of strategic flexibility. So I think that's it for now. Looking forward to the rest of the series. We're going to do this 20 minutes, an insight. We're going to have a crisis-related relevant aspect of that insight that we want to focus on. We're going to have an action step, and then we're going to have some Q&A. And at the end of this 6-week series, you're going to have a whole package of insights that will help you move through this crisis and beyond, not only just to survive it, but thrive. So thank you so very much. Apologies for the wonkiness of Zoom. We do our best. We will look at how we can maybe mitigate some of these polling question challenges, because they really are great. And we'll see you on Thursday. Thank you so very much.